What if I told you that a high-flying Minnesota businessman, with ties to charities, sports teams, and even Hollywood, was secretly running one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history? Not Bernie Madoff, meet Tom Petters, Midwestern mogul turned financial illusionist. He wasn't running a hedge fund or Wall Street scam. No, Petters built his $3.65 billion empire on fake electronics, phantom deals, and a paper trail that led straight to hell. For nearly a decade, Petters fooled investors, banks, and even the feds, until one of his own team members flipped. What followed was a financial implosion that rocked the Midwest and rewrote the Ponzi playbook. This is the story of fraud, lies, greed, and the fall of Tom Petters. It's September 24, 2008. Inside a luxury suite at the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, billionaire businessman Tom Petters is waking up to more than just an alarm. At exactly 7 a.m., the FBI knocks at his door. It's not room service. It's a reckoning. Back in Minnesota, more than 50 federal agents are raiding his company, Petters Group Worldwide. Once hailed as a philanthropic tycoon and savvy CEO, Tom Petters is now the center of a massive federal investigation. The allegations? Fraud. On a scale that would only be outdone later by Bernie Madoff himself, but the road to this dramatic morning didn't begin with handcuffs. It started in small-town Minnesota. Decades earlier, at just 16, Tom Petters already had an eye for business. He opened a shop called Ear Electronics in his family's basement. Soon, he had a downtown office, a secretary, and a bold promise, offering the lowest prices in the country. His hustle grew fast, even hiring college kids to sell his goods. But his mother was shocked to find out via a radio interview that her son wasn't in school, he was running a company. In the 1980s, Petters moved to Colorado, married, started a family, and took over a small electronics chain. But in 1990, that business went bankrupt. They crafted elaborate documents using scissors, glue, and software, anything to keep the illusion alive. They were moving over $100 million a month, just to pay off old investors with new money. A classic Ponzi scheme, but supercharged. In 2008, the global financial crash hit. Investors started asking questions. One hedge fund, Acorn Capital, sued Petters for failing to make a $10 million payment. Another firm, with over $1 billion invested, demanded an audit. The walls were closing in. That's when Deanna Coleman snapped. After earning over $14 million through the scam, she walked into her lawyer's office and confessed everything. She agreed to cooperate with the FBI in exchange for a plea deal. The next day, she returned to work, wearing a wire. Coleman's recordings captured Petters scrambling to raise more money to keep the con afloat. His desperation was obvious. He spoke of divine intervention, pleaded for loans, and even hinted at fleeing to the Caribbean. The FBI pounced. On October 3, 2008, Petters was arrested at his $8 million Lake Minnetonka mansion and held without bail. Federal agents seized mountains of documents and digital files, most of them fake. Investors were devastated. Doug Van Dyke, a retired engineer who had invested his life savings, was forced to return to work. Homes were sold, retirements delayed, lives uprooted. In 2009, Tom Petters went on trial in St. Paul, Minnesota. Prosecutors presented thousands of fake documents and hours of recordings. Bob White testified that he had forged over 10,000 documents over 9 years. Coleman, the insider turned whistleblower, also took the stand. Petters' defense blamed Coleman and White, painting Petters as a grieving father who was too trusting. The jury didn't buy it. On December 2, 2009, Tom Petters was found guilty on all 20 counts of mail fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. He was sentenced to 50 years in federal prison. Deanna Coleman served just over a year. Bob White got 5. Facing massive debts, Petters skipped town and headed back to Minnesota, flat broke and desperate. With a loan from his brother, Petters founded Petters Company Incorporated, PCI, a business that traded distressed and overstocked goods. He found his niche buying products in bulk and flipping them to big-box retailers. By the mid-90s, he ventured into retail again with Petters Warehouse Direct, stores filled with closeout items. The concept took off. He eventually opened over a dozen stores and raked in millions in annual revenue, but Tom wanted more. Riding the early wave of e-commerce, he launched redtag.com and acquired ubd.com, expanding his digital footprint. The real power move came in 2002 when he bought the struggling catalog retailer Fingerhut, rescuing hundreds of local jobs. To the public, he was a hometown hero. To investors, he looked like a financial genius. By 2007, Pedders Group worldwide boasted 50 offices and 3,200 employees globally. His portfolio included high-profile acquisitions like Polaroid and Sun Country Airlines. He lived in multi-million-dollar homes in Minnesota and Florida, flew in private jets, and collected luxury cars and watches, and he gave back. Pedders donated millions to universities, pledged $10 million to his son's college, and funded the John T. Pedders Foundation after his son tragically died in Italy in 2004. Lavish galas, celebrities, and politicians praised his generosity, but under the surface, something didn't add up. Tom Pedders had created the illusion of legitimate business deals. He offered investors promissory notes with sky-high returns, 15%, 20%, sometimes more, claiming he was buying discounted electronics and selling them to giants like Costco and Sam's Club, but there were no electronics. No shipments. No deals, it was all smoke and mirrors. Deanna Coleman, once Pedders' secretary turned operations manager, and Bob White, a consultant, helped create fake invoices, bank records, and purchase orders. Others received shorter sentences. Authorities have recovered over $200 million, but much of the money, over $2 billion, remains lost. Even Pedders' charitable donations were clawed back. Colleges, nonprofits, and churches were asked to return the money, as it had all come from fraud. Doug Van Dyke and his wife now live in a modest apartment near his old job. Their Florida condo is gone. Their lake house is in jeopardy. They're still trying to recover. Tom Pedders wasn't some financial genius. He wasn't a brilliant strategist. He was just a charming man who knew how to sell dreams, and convince people to stop asking questions. Tom Pedders is now serving a 50-year sentence in federal prison, one of the harshest ever handed down in a white-collar case. His victims? Over 4,000 investors, charities, and retirement funds, left holding worthless paper and shattered dreams. His empire? Liquidated. His name? Poison. And yet, you won't find his story in many finance textbooks. Why? Because Pedders wasn't just a fraudster, he was a master illusionist who used the American dream as his camouflage. The house of cards may have fallen, but the echoes of his scam still haunt the halls of corporate America. In the end, his story is a harsh reminder: when something looks too good to be true, it probably is. Subscribe to The Ledger, where we pull back the curtain on money, power, and the cons that shaped America.